You are on the ground. Tell us what it's like now.
Thank you for having me. It has been a difficult situation in Afghanistan for all this time. This is year in review. And last winter, a very difficult situation for the population. Nearly 20 million people with no access to food. And thanks to generous contributions of donors and support of the people of the world, the worst case scenario was avoided, and the widespread famine did not take place. Afghanistan suffers from many problems, among them climate change, years of conflict, low productivity, and as a result of it, we're still in a difficult situation. About 19 million people have problems with accessing food, and about 6.6 million people are actually in the IPC4, which is the heaviest form of malnutrition. Half of the children under the age 5 are malnourished. Economy is in perils, banking system is not functioning.
Does the Taliban have the ability to feed its people?
Well, Taliban's focus in the past year was on correction of the border revenues and on the growth stimulated through the focus on the private sector. Through this, they formulated a $3 billion budget with $1 billion deficit. The previous government of Afghanistan had a $13.5 billion budget. And we don't have, until the moment, any visibility on how these $2 billion are being spent, what is the allocation between the budget lines. And we also don't have neither a national plan or any sectoral development plans or a clear articulation of where these social investments are supposed to be made. I guess in this environment, conclusions are self-explanatory.
What are you seeing, like when you go out into the streets, what are you seeing from people? We just heard from our senior defense reporter, Murray Brewster, that the clock has turned back 20 years in just 12 months alone.
Afghanistan had lost a lot. And let's be very honest, there is no way to compare the situation before and now in terms of the well-being, in terms of operational economy, in terms of the shops. You go out on the streets and you see people selling their belongings. You see many shops shut down. And let's not just talk about Kabul. I travel intensively throughout the country. One thing which is very striking when you visit the deep field and the district is that overall level of development has been very low. I often go to the places we recently affected by the earthquake, or I go to the areas in the north, such as Balhab. The nearest roads there are 200 kilometers away. And the life in those parts of Afghanistan had stopped a century ago.
When you talk about the food shortages, talk about what you think we might see in the winter.
Well, if the urgent steps are not taken, I'll be very frank, and the food prices have gone up. The average price of the food basket in Afghanistan is about 29% up. We will see a very difficult scenes. And let me be very clear, the figure I gave you, 6.6 million people, is an absolute largest number of people in acute malnutrition anywhere in the world. So what we will see if the stocks are not replenished are people starving, children dying, and mothers not being able to save their lives. I'm afraid the forecast is not positive.
Would you call it a potential famine?
Yes, I would call so. And then, frankly speaking, Afghanistan is a very poor agricultural country with very low productivity and very low level of development in the agricultural sector. So the 20 million vulnerable estimate of population in deep state of vulnerability is going to stay. And we have a choice. Either we're going to feed the 20 million people continuously and try to help them, or we try to focus on some longer term solutions, which is a bottom-up economic growth and supporting the villagers and the farmers to produce their own food and feed themselves, and hopefully connecting to some local markets. But that is a kind of a longer-term objective. This will not be achieved anytime now. Between now and winter, So we are bracing for another difficult season.
What are you hoping from the international community, and including Canada in that?
Well, one important element is that the people of Afghanistan are on the taking side of it all. And they carry a blame for an offense these poor people have not made. So they need a solidarity with the world. The world needs to stay in solidarity with the people of Afghanistan, with women of Afghanistan, with girls of Afghanistan. Afghanistan people should not be feeling abandoned by the international community, because it is absolutely important that heart of Asia stays connected to the world.
Do they feel abandoned?
I think they do. I think they do, and they also are very grateful. On the other hand, they know they would not have gone through this harsh year without our support. But they are young people. The vast majority of this country are very young people. They want to be a global citizens. They enjoy same things that any young people around the world do, and they want education. They want future. They want a normal life. That's what the people of Afghanistan want. And even in the village, and I talk to people in the most remote village, they want education and they want a normal modern way of life.
Now, we were talking just before I let you go that food is a crisis. It's going to get worse in the winter. There were 2 shipments of food that were supposed to be, and I think you might have heard from our reporter ahead of time, that were supposed to be delivered by a Canadian aid agency, but because Canada defines the Taliban as terrorists, the agency workers cannot deliver that food or risk facing 10 years in prison. What needs to happen?
Well, I think the United States of America have issued a number of licenses and exemptions. UN Security Council have very specific caveats for humanitarian work, such as distribution of food. In our work on a daily basis on the ground, we make sure that food is delivered directly to the communities, that the de facto authorities do not have any hands on it, and that it goes straight to every country has its own regulations. It's really different situation from one to another, but I do believe that it comes to relief items such as food and basic survival means, assistance needs to go straight into the hands of those who need it most.
So you're saying that Canada really needs to give more flexibility on that regulation, is what I'm hearing.
I would say so, particularly when it comes to very basic items such as food and medicine, because Hannah, I'm so happy you're covering this. One could go to the hospitals here and hold the hand of a child who is maybe 1 year old and is only a couple of kilos. You see very atrocious scenes. I mean, depriving those from food and basic items is something we should focus on and giving them as much as they can. I understand the situation in the world is very difficult, and helping the place ruled by Taliban is not popular in no parliament, in no place in the world. It's very difficult to convince good people of the world to stay connected, but we must do it.